I'll share with you one skill that will differentiate you from the other analysts. And that one skill is how to identify evil. How powerful would that be? To get started, we first must understand what normal behavior looks like. And normal behavior will look different in every environment. This is why it's extremely important to baseline your environment. That way you can compare a known good state to a known bad state. For example, if your environment gets infected with malware or you notice that it's beaconing out to a C2 and you had a golden image once upon a time, you can always compare that to see what was added. And of course, I cannot forget to mention having fundamental knowledge. But in today's video, I want to talk about the steps of an attacker, what their goals or intentions are, and what kind of frameworks can we utilize to help guide our investigation. I mean, think about it. There must be a reason why an attacker is interested in your environment or already in your environment. Is it to use you to pivot over to another environment and compromise them? Maybe steal some sensitive information, espionage, or it could be financially driven. No matter the reason, we must understand and be aware of the steps that they take to prevent them from ultimately achieving their goal, their objective. The first one I want to talk about is Lockheed Martin Kill Chain. This kill chain is designed to map out the phases an attacker will typically go through. The first one we have is reconnaissance, which is gathering information, weaponization, crafting their weapon of choice, delivery, thanks but no thanks, exploitation, take advantage of a vulnerability, installation, installing malware, command and control, call back to the attacker, and finally, actions on objective, whatever that may be. I always say, no matter how tight your security controls are, or if you've implemented a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity tool, there will always be a way in. However, if you can prevent the attacker from getting to their actions on objective, you win. You might ask, how do we prevent attackers from reaching their objective? Well, in short, you need to add layers and layers and layers of defense, aka defense in depth. For those that have taken a course and heard about defense in depth, I hope that all makes sense now if it didn't already. We want to delay the attacker as much as we can to reach their actions on objective. So for example, one way that we can delay them is implementing, guess what? MFA. Implementing MFA onto your accounts will delay an attacker, but they will get in eventually if they really wanted to. Then hopefully you'll have another layer beneath it to again delay their actions until you can detect it and kick them out. Another way we can map out an attacker is using a framework called the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Being in cybersecurity, if you're already in there or you're learning about it, you'll likely have heard about this framework before. This framework will allow analysts to understand the tactics, techniques, and procedures, aka the TTPs. I recall working at a consulting firm and an analyst came up to me and asked me,
hey, how do you use the MITRE ATT&CK framework?
And at that time, I couldn't explain it. So I literally told them to click on a technique and just read it. Thanks, man. Really helpful, I know. Knowing what I know now, I would tell the analyst to use MITRE ATT&CK framework. One must ask the question, what are you trying to look for or understand? Is it a specific event, a particular adversary, or is it something completely different? We use this framework to map out what is possible for an attacker when it comes to their tactics, techniques, and procedures. This will help us understand what phase an attacker may be in or what phase you begin your investigation in. We can also utilize the MITRE ATT&CK framework to understand more about our adversaries. For example, what does APT XYZ target or use as a tool? And by the way, they target everybody. I'll provide you with an example. You identify a new scheduled task, executing evil.exe every 15 minutes. You go and check the MITRE ATT&CK framework and see scheduled task is under the following tactics: execution, persistence, and privilege escalation. Now you ask yourself, what about the other tactics because those were not yet identified? Okay, defense evasion is the next tactic. So what technique can an attacker do to perform defense evasion? Impair defenses. So the next step that you as an analyst might take is check to see if any antivirus or EDR had been disabled. There are many ways to utilize the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Many security vendors market their coverage of 100% across the MITRE ATT&CK framework. But it's definitely a good idea to bookmark it and start learning and using the MITRE ATT&CK framework or the kill chain or both, because these frameworks will be extremely beneficial for you in your future career. If you watched my previous video on how to prepare for a job interview, you might recall that one of the responsibilities in that job description was understanding frameworks. Hopefully, after seeing this video, you have a little bit more understanding of these frameworks. If you haven't seen that video and you're in the process of job hunting, I highly encourage you go and check that out. When it comes to obtaining the skill of identifying evil, aka suspicious events or anomalous events, putting yourself in a known compromised environment will help you understand what suspicious or anomalous activity may look like. In order to do this, we can look into labs that are hosted on platforms like Cyber Defenders, for example. And you can go through one of the labs to follow the footsteps of an attacker. Another way is to utilize a tool called Atomic Red Team. This tool will allow you to generate telemetry based on TTPs, and you can use this to generate detections. We'll jump into a quick demo. To get started with Atomic Red Team, I recommend you spin up a virtual machine with Splunk and Sysmon installed. If you're not sure how to do that, I would encourage you to pause this video and check out my video on how to get started with Splunk and Sysmon, which I'll link down below. Otherwise, on our Windows machine, we will open up PowerShell, and because we are running scripts, we'll need to disable execution policy. In order to do that, we can type in set-execution policy bypass-scope current user. Hit enter, and we'll hit Y for yes. Now that we have set the execution policy to bypass, we can move on to the next step. Next, we want to install the execution framework along with the Atomics folder. In order to do that, we'll paste in the following command, and I'll leave it down in the description below. Now, you might see Windows Defender picking up some viruses and threats. That is perfectly normal. However, we'll click Manage Settings and then set an exclusion for the Atomics folder. Open up Windows Security, and under Virus and Threat Protection Settings, you want to click on Manage Settings. Scroll down, and at the bottom, you'll see an exclusion section. We want to click on Add or Remove Exclusions. From here, we want to add an exclusion, and we'll select Folder. What we're trying to look for is the Atomics folder that was installed. It should be located under your C drive, and then click on Atomic Red Team right here. We'll go and exclude the entire folder. You should see something like this. Once you see that, we can start reinstalling it by using the -force option. To begin, we'll clear out the screen and then type in install -atomic red team -get atomics -force. And we should be good now. To list out what is available, we can type in invoke -atomic test all -show details brief. And this will list out everything applicable to the operating system. For example, if you're using Linux or Mac, you will likely get techniques related to those. Whereas I'm in Windows, we'll get techniques related to Windows. If we head back to our MITRE ATT&CK framework, let's say we are interested in the persistence tactic, specifically in the bit job. So we can go ahead and click on that. And on the right-hand side, we can see that the ID is listed as T1197. To take a look at what kind of TTPs are available in the Atomic Red Team, we can type in invoke-atomic test, and then we'll type in the ID that we're interested in, which was 1197, because if you recall, the bit job ID is T1197. That is what I have here. And I'll also type in -show details brief. From the Atomics Red Team, we see that we have 4 options. So we can generate this technique by using bits admin download, using the command shell, PowerShell, and others. For this demo, we'll just run everything. So we'll type in atomic test and our ID, so T1197, and hit enter. And in the background, it's going through all of those tests that you saw earlier. While we wait for this to run, I think right now is a good time to let you know that if you were to quit this PowerShell window and try to do this again in terms of running Atomic Red Team, you'll likely get an error. So let me demonstrate. If I open up PowerShell again and then type in invoke-atomic test, I get a atomic test is not recognized. That just means that we need to re-import the module, and in order to do that, we need to run the following command. Again, I'll list it down in the description. We can hit enter. And now, once we rerun invoke-atomic test, it should work. Now that some of it is done, although I see process timed out after 120 seconds, that's okay. We'll take a look and see what kind of telemetry that generated. So we'll head over to our Splunk instance and let's query specifically for bits. I'm now in Splunk, and because I'm not exactly sure what I am looking at, I went ahead and just typed in bits. And right off the bat, we can see a couple events that had been generated. What I'm going to do next is clean up the query a little bit. That way it's more presentable. All right, so let me quickly explain to you what this query is doing. I'm essentially creating a table by typing in table, and I'm listing out the time, the parent image, parent command line, image, and command line. The reason why I'm doing it this way, it allows me to see the relationship between the parent and child. This can allow me to quickly identify potential suspicious activity. And lastly, I am sorting the time. Before I go down and look for the bits activity, I wanted to bring the MITRE ATT&CK again. Now, if we were to look into the detection section under the bits persistence tactic and technique, we can see in the first ID here where it says command execution, it says to monitor executed commands and arguments from the bits admin tool, specifically the transfer, create, add file, and all the other good stuff here. Now, when we head back into Splunk, keep in mind of the transfer. We'll scroll down just a little bit, and we notice here, the parent image is cmd.exe, so your command prompt, and that ran the following command. It was using bits admin with the transfer. Now, does that mean if you see transfer in your environment, is that a bad thing? Definitely not. If you recall earlier, I mentioned baseline your environment. The reason why you do this is so you can understand what your environment looks like. This is definitely a good threat hunting technique, just to make sure that you weed out all the legitimate activity, and then you might be able to find evil. If we scroll down a little bit more, we notice that there's another command here, and it has the create. Again, if we go back into the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it's asking to look for create. The more you learn and practice your craft and putting yourself in a known compromised environment, the better you become in quickly identifying evil, and that skill is what will set you apart from everybody else. If you stay till the end, let me know by putting a heart emoji in the comment section down below, as in the future I'll be doing a giveaway and only those with a heart emoji will be entered. But keep this between you and I. That is it for the video, and if you enjoyed it and found it informative, let me know by hitting that like button and subscribe if you want to. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.